Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Nolene Duff and I'm the Chair of the Panel of Administrators, and I'd like to welcome everybody to today's Council meeting, the 10th of September 2024. Excuse me. Firstly, I'd like to introduce my colleague panel members, Mr Miguel Belmar.
Good afternoon.
Mr Cameron Boardman.
Good afternoon, Chair.
And our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Paterson. And our senior team, our Acting Director, Customer and Corporate Services, Chloe Casey. And we have Steve Coleman, Director, Community Life, and James Collins, Director, City Planning and Infrastructure. We're supported by Matthew Crane in AV and Nicole Road, Senior Governance Officer, and we have a number of other senior staff here with us this afternoon, and I welcome everybody in the gallery and those watching online as well. I'd like to open the meeting with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities and their rich culture, and pays respect to their elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to remarkable diversity with many cultures, languages, faiths and communities of worship, ages, LGBTQI+ identities and landscapes, together forming our rich and dynamic community story. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I move to item 2, the confirmation of minutes. There is one previous set of minutes to be confirmed, and that is for the council meeting of the 20th of August 2024. Could I have a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes?
Yes, I'll move those.
Thank you, Mr Belmar.
Second, Chair.
Seconder, Mr Boardman. All in favour? Carried. Item 3, declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and do not have any conflict of interest relevant to the agenda papers today. Do my colleague administrators or council officers have any conflicts to declare?
I've got nothing to declare, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman.
Nothing to declare.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Nothing to note.
And Chair, through you, I do have an interest to declare in item 14.1, the annual CEO performance review, which is in closed council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr Paterson. Item 4 is public question time, and there are 13 public questions submitted through Council's website for this afternoon's meeting, and I'll hand over to our Chief Executive Officer, Mr Glenn Paterson, to work through the questions. Thank you, Mr Paterson.
Thank you, Chair. In accordance with Rule 65.11, any person who submits a public question must be in the gallery at the time the question and response is due to be read. If a person is not present in the gallery, the question will not be read. However, it will be recorded in the minutes of this council meeting, together with a copy of the written response. The first question has been received from Stephen Madulek. Can I please confirm that they or a representative are in the gallery today? Thank you. The question relates to parks in Ackland Park in Narre North. The Narre North community desperately needs an upgrade to Ackland Park, and the community is still waiting. Narre North is growing and there are many families who live in the area. Why has this upgrade been taking so long, and when will the upgrade be done? And Chair, the response will be read by Mr Collins.
Council will soon be commencing an upgrade of Ackland Park with a draft concept design currently out for community consultation. The upgrade will include a new playground, multi-use basketball court, seating, fitness equipment and more. It is currently anticipated to be completed by June 2025. More information is available on the Casey Conversations website.
Questions 2 and 3 have been received from Jared Doble. Are they or a representative in the gallery today? No. We'll move on to questions 4 and 5 that have been received from Yawad Irfani. Are they or a representative in the gallery today? Doesn't appear so. Question 6 has been submitted by Darren Thompson. Again, are they or a representative present today? No. Questions 7 and 8 have been received from Anthony Tassone. Are they or a representative present today? No. Question 9 and 10 have been received from Maya Sisko. Are they or a representative in the gallery? Question 11 has been received from Kasuni Mendes. Are they or a representative with us today? No, they are not. We'll move on to question 12 and 13, which have been received from Nathan Orrell. Again, are they or a representative present in the gallery today? No. And that concludes the questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr Patterson. We'll now move on to item 5, officer reports, for consideration this afternoon. And the first item is item 5.1, which is the 2023-24 budget outcome financial statements and performance statement. And I've been advised by Mr Boardman that there is an alternative recommendation to be moved today. So I'll hand over to you, Mr Boardman.
Thank you very much, Chair. I do need to move an amendment to this recommendation. Specifically, it relates to point 6 on the public recommendation as appearing on the screen at the moment and contained within the Public Council agenda for the purpose of ensuring that we capture all the detail within the amendment. I will read the amendment in full and highlight the specific change to point 6. So the new recommendation will be 1, that pursuant to Section 98 and Section 99 of the Local Government Act 2020, Council approves in principle the draft financial statements and performance statements for 2023-24. 2, that pursuant to Section 98 and Section 99 of the Local Government Act 2020, Council authorises the administrators to certify the financial statement and performance statement in their final form after any changes recommended or agreed by the Auditor-General's Office has been made. 3, the Principal Accounting Officer, the Chief Financial Officer, be authorised to make any non-material changes to the statements that may arise as a result of the audit. 4, the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee be notified of any material changes proposed to be made to any of the statements so that it may be decided whether the Audit and Risk Committee needs to meet further to consider such proposed changes prior to 2 councillors signing off on the statements. 5, a copy of the statements in their final form be forwarded to the members of the Audit and Risk Committee. Chair, as I've alluded, point 6 will now read that Council notes that the surplus result for 2023-2024 is $134.4 million compared to a budget of $117.3 million. The cash surplus for 2023-2024 is $0.3 million compared to a budget deficit of $7.7 million. 7, Council approves $38.8 million of carryover from 2023-2024 into 2024-25 for the Capital Works program as attachment 3, and Council approves budget variations. This is point 8. Council approves budget variations by the end year adjustments to the 2023 Capital Works program, resulting in a $0.3 million Capital Works budget surplus at attachment 4. And I'll move the amended recommendation in my name.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thanks, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman, please speak to your motion.
Chair, in relation to the amended recommendation and why there has been a change to the surplus result for 23-24, it is important that I give the context to the gallery and those online, and note that the amended financial statements will be included online following the adoption of this recommendation, assuming that it is adopted. The context is, Chair, that the Audit and Risk Committee of all councils meet prior to a council meeting, an ordinary council meeting which is scheduled to adopt the financial reports. to determine the financial reports, the performance report and the closing report from the Victorian Auditor-General's Office. In this case, VAGO acts as our external auditors. Those reports are provided to the Audit and Risk Committee in the first instance. It is an opportunity for the Audit and Risk Committee members to review the detail contained within the reports, to hear management's response to the reports, to hear VAGO's identification of any specific areas of audit focus and any other areas that have been of note and need to be either statutory or otherwise reported, plus, of course, management's response to those areas which VAGO have identified. As you would know, Chair, and members of the public know, I'm the delegated council member on the Audit and Risk Committee. I confirm that I was in attendance at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting last Thursday, being the 3rd of September, and the process to date, as I've just outlined, was indeed the process that we adopted at the meeting. However, the CFO did advise us at the meeting that in a very short time prior to the meeting commencing, the Victorian Auditor-General's Office had advised her of some misstatements that they believed needed to be changed in the financial statements in order to be corrected insofar as identifying specific financial year calculations, which I'll come to in a bit more detail. And that the Auditor-General's Office representatives, when he attended the meeting, went through and explained those changes in a lot of detail and provided the context around that. We did note at the meeting that we didn't have the final closeout report from the Auditor-General, nor did we have the updated financial statements as indicated with these changes incorporated, which did not allow us to adopt the financial statements in their entirety, although we do note, and for the reasons I'll outline shortly, that those changes were relatively minor in their context and rationale. What the Audit and Risk Committee agreed to do, Chair, was to consider the information that we had at the time, which in a normal context was comprehensive and satisfactory, albeit we did make a decision to resolve to further consider any further information from the Auditor-General's Office and to either convene a further meeting of the committee and or seek a delay of this meeting, Chair, in order to allow the committee to consider any materiality around the financial statements and to make any recommendations. As of Friday of last week, where we were given an indication from VAGO that we would have these reports, the committee did make an indication that they would, in their own time, consider those changes by way of circular resolution. Unfortunately, it was the case that the Victorian Auditor-General's Office could not provide those changes by Friday, and subsequently the committee and myself included were unable to receive the final reports, including VAGO's closing report, until around about 6:30 p.m. last night. I do want to firmly place on the record my appreciation to the CFO here, who has been very vigilant, and her team in ensuring that the information was provided to VAGO in a timely fashion to ensure that we could get to the point where we are tonight. We did publicly set this meeting as the meeting that we would consider the financial statements, and I am satisfied that every effort has been made by the CFO and her team to meet that obligation, and that VAGO has worked as best as they can in the circumstances to provide those reports, albeit that it has been within a relatively constrained period of time. By saying that is that there was no obligation on behalf of the Audit and Risk Committee and the members particularly and individually to consider the information that was provided in such a confined period of time, i.e. from 6:30 p.m. last night to today, noting that they needed to consider the information and provide an endorsement by way of recommendation to us so that we could tonight indeed sign off on these accounts. And I need to stress there was no obligation on them whatsoever to do that. But they have done that, and it really does need to be noticed our extreme appreciation to John Ewan, Carol Pagnon and Ernest Stabic for taking the time to review what are very comprehensive and detailed financial statements, along with the performance statement and the closing report from VAGO, and for them to make an appropriate recommendation within the time frame. And I'm pleased to place on the record, Chair, that Mr Nguyen, the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee, did make this such recommendation to me as the Council representative at 10:57am this morning. I'm pleased to place on the record that Mr Emmett Stabik, made the recommendation to me as the Council recommendation, Council delegate on the ARC at 7:56am, and I'm pleased to also note that Carol Pagnon, by way of all of the 3 email stamps, made the same recommendation to adopt these reports tonight at 11:27am. Likewise, I haven't considered the information contained within the reports, and I'm pleased to move the recommendation as amended as put. Chair, what the key change here is an anomaly in the calculation of government grants. It's an issue that the VAGO has identified, and specifically, it has changed the draft surplus or the forecast surplus for 2024, which was originally in the public documents from 171.4 million. That has been revised downwards to 134.4 million, which is a decrease of approximately $37 million. This relates specifically to the Auditor General's Office identifying that a correction needs to be made under the valuation of land under roads for the financial years of 2021 and 22 and 22 and 23. What this means in a technical sense is the total income that the Council achieved in those financial years and the financial year 23-24, which we're adopting tonight, remains the same, but there has to be a reallocation because of this reevaluation, which is a standard that they've identified, and accordingly that income needs to be recognised in this financial year. So overall, Chair, that the total assets do remain unchanged, but their presentation in the final statements do need to be adjusted, and this is accepted not just from an accounting practice, but it's accepted by me, the Audit and Risk Committee members and the financial executives within the organisation. Specifically, as I've said, it's 37.03 million. That relates to 25.57 million relating to road assets that were capitalised in the financial year, specifically 22 and 23, and 11.46 million that relates to the road assets capitalised prior to the financial year in 21-22, as I've said. So it is a classification recapitalisation. It doesn't change the overall income. There is an impact upon the balance sheet of the organisation, and I will go through and articulate those specific changes because it is important to place it on the record. But insofar as the overall result of the financial report for the City of Casey, it is that key change to our surplus of 134.4 million against the publicly stated 1714 million, which is the key difference. Chair, I don't wish to talk about the performance indicators in the financial report in any great detail because I'll leave that to my colleague, Mr Miguel Belmar, apart from articulating that it is a very solid result. But if I could take some time, Chair, to just go through the impacts that this particular change has had on the notes, to get it on the record, and to ensure that the public is aware of the specific changes that do have continuity throughout the financial statements, and to ensure that we have vigilantly done a line-by-line, page-by-page turn to correct these particular misstatements to ensure that we satisfy VAGO's concerned, and now that the finance report that we are adopting tonight is accurate. And I'll start on page 10 of the financial report, which is notes to the financial report under note 2.11, the income and the revenue expenditure. Under the contributions non-monetary, line 6, the new figure under the actual in 2024 will read 112,073, and of course that is in millions, and that results in a restatement of the actual of 596,174 millions under the total income revenue on the same page. If I could go to the next change in the finance statement on page 14 of the report under point 2.22, summary of income, revenue, expenses, assets and the capital expenses by program. This is under 2024, under City Planning and Infrastructure, Income and Revenue, the adjusted figure is 198,502. Under surplus deficit, the adjusted figure is 67,510, resulting in cumulative changes under the bottom line of 596,174 and 134405. That is also reflected in the restated 2023 on the same page of page 24, income revenue of 307,520, surplus deficit of 64,671, resulting in restatement of 713,345 and 282,203 accordingly. Chair, if I could move to page 17. And under note 3.5, contributions, non-monetary contributions, the restated of 2024 is 112,073. The restatement of 2023 is 210,829, resulting in restatement of total contributions under note 3.5 of 194,276, 291,765 accordingly. If I could move to the next item in the financial reports that needs to be restated, and it is on page 44, I believe. No, it's on page 31, sorry. It is under note 6.2, property infrastructure plan equipment, the pipe disclosures under the total of contributions under land. This is the particular material reclassification as advised by VAGO. The contributions will now read 45295, and the total under the same column of contributions will now read 112073. And as fair value, which is under land specialised, this is fair value of the 1st July 2023, it restated. It will now read 1723245. If I could now move to, there's only a couple more to go, Chair, if you could bear with me. If I could now move to page 44. I think it's actually 49. If I can just, I think it's under 9.2. Yes. Page 49 under 9.2, the reconciliation of cash flows and operating activities to surplus deficit. The surplus deficit for this year's surplus, 2024 as stated, the surplus is 134,405. The restated surplus from 2023 is 282,203. And in the same table, contributions non-monetary assets, the restated deficit of 2024 is 112,073. The restated in 2023 is 210,829, and I think there is only one final change that I need to reference, Chair, and that is on page 52 under note 9.4, which is the prior period adjustments to the non-monetary contributions. The prior period adjustments under the total equity, the bottom line is the new reference is 152,624, and June 2023 is restated as 705,4000. So, Chair, that outlines the changes that have been made in the financial statements which appear on the public documents. As I said, the process has been applied vigorously through the Audit and Risk Committee meeting last Tuesday and through the process in the last 24 hours and the numerous phone calls that I have had with senior management here and with the Auditor General's office. I am satisfied that the updated financial reports reflect the identified issues as identified through VAGO, and that the rigorous process that we as member of the Audit and Risk Committee have made assess the accuracy of the financial statements, the areas of the audit focus as identified in VAGO's closing report and the representation that accordingly have been dealt with and considered by management, and I am pleased that they are an accurate reflection of the financial performance of the organisation, and I trust that with the amended recommendation that yourselves as my colleagues will adopt the financial reports, noting that you've only had these for a very short period of time as well, but I trust that I have given you an adequate and satisfactory explanation of the process to date.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Mr Boardman and the Audit and Risk Committee, as well as our internal financial staff, for the work they've done in a very short period of time over the last week to ensure that we're in a position today to adopt this motion. I have carefully followed not only the discussion by Mr Boardman this afternoon as he took us through the documents, but also can attest to earlier briefings which have assisted me in understanding how the situation arose and the amendments that are necessary to properly reflect the state of Council's reports that we're adopting this evening. The key issue that I consider in adopting them tonight is that when the external auditors inform us that they are adjusting or reviewing an assessment of a definition, then it's appropriate that we follow that, and that's essentially what has occurred. And in doing so, Mr Boardman has now taken us through those parts of the reports that require an amendment, and he has placed us on the public record, and I am satisfied that through his explanation, the community can also be satisfied that the appropriate work has been done to ensure that the financial statements properly reflect the comprehensive income statement, the balance sheet, our cash flow, and our performance. I want to note as well, which is the documents tonight confirm the work that has been done by Council over the last 12 months with respect to our statement of capital works. I note that there's been substantial works that have been carried out over the last 12 months, which are attested to in these documents. And I note also the carryover amount that is proposed by this motion. And I note in particular that with respect to the notice that's been given in the public documents, those amounts have not altered, and the community can be absolutely assured that our capital works program and our capital works budget continues to ensure that delivery occurs of the programs that have been budgeted for and provided for in the past. And with those comments, and again with thanks to Mr Boardman for his careful analysis this evening, I'm happy to second this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I also am happy to support the recommendation. I think it's fair to say it's been quite an unusual and late in the day process, and I do note that I was handed this document with those changes about half an hour ago prior to the council meeting, so it's not ideal. But I do thank Mr Boardman for his detailed briefing to me earlier today, and I note that the changes are as a result of generally accepted accounting practices that VAGO have picked up and needed to revise at a late point in the process. I also want to note and record my appreciation particularly to Mr Nguyen, who had some challenging matters that he had to deal with, but in spite of that, his professional commitment prevailed, and he undertook to both chair the meeting and to undertake to review the revised material, and to the other members of the Audit Committee. That said, I think we are in a very strong position financially in the City of Casey. There have been many challenges throughout the year financially, and a number of those are summarised at a very high level in the council report. But we've had many challenges to project budgets, particularly in the capital works program. We've had liquidation of a number of contractors undertaking works for us that we've had to work through. That has led to increased costs, and in part has led to that carryover in terms of the capital budget. And we had a question this afternoon about a capital item that the community are interested in, you know, providing great facilities and resources to the community of Casey. So we are confident with the team that lead that area that they have worked incredibly hard to bring to fruition those projects that they're able to bring forward this year, and that they'll continue with the implementation of those that are carried forward. I think there have been some great initiatives this year. The cost issues do remain a big issue for us, and we're very aware of the stresses on the community as a result of high mortgage payments, etc., and their capacity to contribute to the council's finances through rates on property. We're very, very conscious of that and aware of that, and nevertheless, we've had to cut our cloth to meet the requirements of the community and to meet the demands that are a result of a growing community of Casey and a diverse community. So with those comments, I'd like to put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Move to item 5.2, the adoption of Amendment C286, the Collison Estate Development Contributions Plan. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I will move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. And a seconder?
Seconder, Chair.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight, in moving this recommendation, which is in 5 parts, I note that we are coming to the conclusion of a process that commenced some time ago with respect to my involvement as an administrator, when I recall being briefed and having the opportunity to do a visit, or in the parlance, a site inspection of the Collison estate, and to see the opportunities that existed there for further work to be done. I note that the adoption of this amendment and the adoption of the Collison Estate DCP, as it's set out in the Planning Panel report, addresses the following issue: that the City of Casey has prepared the Collison Estate Development Contributions Plan to provide a framework for collecting levies to fund the provision of infrastructure to support the future development of the Collison Estate and the needs of its residents. The infrastructure projects identified in the DCP have been informed by the draft Collison Estate Development Plan of October 2023, which identifies a road and drainage network, areas of open space, local neighbourhood activity centre, and future community facilities providing kindergartens and maternal child health care services. I note that the planning panel met over a number of days. It took submissions and evidence from both council, from experts, and from other community representatives. And the amendment that we're adopting tonight has taken into account that material and the proposals by the panel in achieving a good community outcome, which will achieve an overall net community benefit in ensuring that an area of the City of Casey, which commenced development in the 1950s, is able to be brought up to the requirements of a modern, well-planned estate. This is a good outcome, and I'm happy to move this motion and to thank again all of those that have worked on this project.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, I endorse Mr Belmar's words. It is a matter that we have been briefed extensively on over many years now. We as Mr Belmar identified, we have personally all toured the area. It is extraordinary when you see the geospatial mapping of the area and to see the uniqueness of of the proposed area, the surrounded high-density growth that effectively 360 degrees encapsulates what's now known as the Collison Estate, is fascinating. But insofar as the process that's been identified and articulated by Mr. Belmar, and going back as he has identified many, many years, including to 1994 when the local structure plan was later replaced by the Cranbourne East Development Plan, and that was effectively one of the precursors, I think, from the South East Corridor Growth Framework. This matter has come to us formally twice. On the 13th of December 2022, we resolved to seek authorisation to prepare and exhibit this amendment. Substantially, the finalisation of the amended case as we're adopting tonight has not changed in any great format. There are some amendments that have been accepted by management, which Mr. Belmar has articulated, but we did in December 2022 to adopt the DCP, but it did exclude some early works intervention as we've discussed. There were a number of conditions that came out of that process, which Mr. Belmar has also articulated, but it was early this year on the 19th of March when we did consider the amended submissions relevant to this. We referred it to the panel. We obviously, as an organisation, commented on the submissions and our support thereof to that, and included in the public report is the planning panel report and the final recommendations, most of which are infrastructure based, all of which have been either accepted in part or in whole by management, and what we are adopting today is the next stage in the process. So I do put on record, similar to Mr. Belmar, that the comprehensiveness of the information that's been provided to us over a number of years, the detail that we have been privy to, both that has allowed us to make the decisions prior to tonight's council meeting and to provide feedback and advice to the organisation throughout the process, and to then finally make that recommendation for the planning panel to do what planning panels do. And of course, the finalisation of their work has been an exemplar in planning process approvals and dealing with matters of such complexity, particularly as they relate to traffic infrastructure, amenity, and many of the other issues that are identified in the amendment itself. But one which I think we all put on the record quite firmly, Chair, that is a great community outcome, and one that we're very interested in looking towards the success being achieved in the future. And with those words, I'm very pleased to second the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. I also support the recommendation, and I think it's a sensational example of how long some of these processes can actually take, and the amount of time and effort from both the community and from council officers in undertaking consultation and discussion and explanation, and that with this particular development contributions plan goes back to 2019 and before 2019. So it will yield ultimately, when it comes into fruition, an estimated 1,635 allotments. And the amount of time and effort that's gone into achieving that is quite extraordinary. So it's worth noting that. And I thank both the community members and the team under the leadership of James Collins for their work on this. I'll put this to the vote. All in favour? Carried. And I'll just quickly move over to item 5.3, which is on page 354. The Planning Scheme Amendment C284, Planning Policy Framework Rewrite. Do I have a mover for the recommendation?
Chair, I will move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar?
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you. Seconded by Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, I invite you to speak to the motion.
Chair, I'm just going to make some very brief comments because this is a matter which we've discussed in significant detail at our council meeting in May 2023. I believe we are considering the recommendations from the planning panel. which is the adaptation of the planning scheme amendment, the C284 case, which is the planning policy framework rewrite, which is the main document which influences the Casey planning scheme. We received the panel report on the 18th of July. We released it to the public on the 1st of August, consistent with our engagement policy. Whilst the report was favourable, the panel did conclude that the amendment was well founded, was strategically justified. There was undeniable net community benefits identified, and the principles of sustainable development and the consistency with all of the policies within the organisation were abided by. There was discussion within the amendment from the panel report, which included aspects relating to environmental risk, to amenity, to landfill buffers, which is a matter which we've been, again, extensively briefed upon, as they do have an impact in many other areas of the municipality. The panel report outlined areas of bushfire management, heritage, geo-heritage protection. There was quite a significant amount of discussion on high-pressure gas transmission pipelines, including future infrastructure considerations in that regard. Further identified the proposed closed regional park, PSP, future PSPs, which included outlines of activity centre, public open space contributions, and all of the relevant information relevant to the scheme's background. Overall, that the 12 panel recommendations, there are 8 that relate to relatively minor administrative or drafting changes. The advice from council officers are that they are generally consistent with the submissions made by council throughout the panel hearing, and that they are indeed supported by council in full. There's 4 of the panel recommendations which are only in part supported. The in-part support were discussed in the panel hearing, but were further detailed in the panel recommendations. They directly address the panel's intended outcomes, but they do require further minor changes, considering the discussion that the panel had with the council representatives at the hearing to ensure that we can better reflect and implement the panel's recommendations. I do put on the record, Chair, that there are no recommendations that are not supported. This is a very good outcome and shows that the detailed analysis, the preparation by the council team here, led by Mr Collins and his team, has been, again, an exemplary performance in not just attention to detail, but abiding by the strategic and the legislative considerations of such a complex case. My interpretation of some of the administrative amendments relate to changes in diction and wording. They clarify some of the very limited, and I say limited, ambiguity on some of the specific conditions within the amendment itself, and it is an improvement overall, but as I've said, that they are relatively minor. But we do note that this is a key document for the organisation in the future, and that this will be something that will serve a significant policy framework for future councillors to abide by, so that decisions made in the future are made consistent with the policy, are made consistent with the amendment and the details contained with the framework, and are made consistent with legislation, particularly the Planning and Environment Act. And with those words, Chair, I'm very pleased to support the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Just some brief comments, Chair. I want to, again, just as Mr Boardman has done, thank those members of Council that have worked on this important amendment, which is a reconsideration of a major part of our scheme. I note as well the thanks of the panel that considered this matter. And not to be too self-congratulatory, but I note that the panel itself commends Council on progressing a significant amendment which streamlined the format and content of the planning scheme and ensures local content reflects current strategic plans and policy. And Council has made significant efforts to resolve issues raised in submissions. Strategic planning of this type is a major piece of work which will have long-term benefit impacts, long-term beneficial impacts for the community, and it ensures that our planning scheme is up to date and best responds to the changing nature of this council. And with those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I have nothing to add. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.4. For those following the agenda, we're now on to page 579. Road discontinuance, Sophra Road and Bells Road crossing. Is there a mover for the recommendation, which is to seek endorsement to commence the discontinuance of part of Sophra Road in Clyde North?
Yes, I will move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman? Mr Belmar?
Thank you, Chair. This is in part a procedural statutory motion that's required. I note that it has arisen because the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action has asked Council to discontinue the road for the purposes of minimising a road reserve in the intersection of Sophra Road and Bells Road, Clyde North, so that the water supply easement may be increased in size. So that is that's the basis for the request. I've considered the material, I've considered the explanation provided to us by council officers as to why we should accede to that, and I am happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, very briefly, likewise, I have considered the notice of the discontinuance, the justification around that, including the protection of Melbourne Water's interest in the desalination pipeline, which I think circumvents the road discontinuance. I'm satisfied that the process consistent with our statutory and other policy and planning framework requirements has been followed, and I'm pleased to support the recommendation as put.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. We now move on to item 5.5, which is Amendment C296 to the Casey Planning Scheme, Cross-Kell Employment Precinct Structure Plan and Infrastructure Contributions Plan. There's a recommendation on page 584. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I will move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second it.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, the recommendation is a very, albeit very slight, deviation from practice, where the recommendation is seeking our endorsement to delegate authority to the Manager Growth and Investment to make an amendment, to make a submission to the planning scheme amendment of the C296 case, which is known as the Cross-Kell Employment Precinct in Cranbourne East. Whilst normally this submission would come back to Council for consideration, we do note that we are about to enter in a period of caretaker. Our term will end shortly, and we'll make some further comments of that later in the meeting. But considering the significance and the importance of this particular process, which has been initiated by the Victorian Planning Authority, and the timeliness of it, and to ensure that the preparation of our submission, that there is adequate time for consideration of the issues, and that that public consultation can be front-ended into the process, and an overall decision can be made within the statutory framework. This is appropriate in the circumstance. It may be some time before an elected council is sworn into this organisation, and that elected council will have as their first obligation to ensure they understand their roles, their understanding of their governance obligations and their statutory frameworks and other considerations. And by the time that occurs, and that they meet their mandatory training and other considerations, this could potentially delay the process, and hence why the recommendation today is seeking delegated authority to make the submission to meet the VPA's timelines. This is dealing, as I said, with the Cross-Kell Employment Precinct. The PSP will be called the Cross-Kell Employment Precinct Structure Plan and the Cross-Kell Employment Infrastructure Contributions Plan, and they will be incorporated in the planning scheme itself if it is ultimately approved. Overall, this is a significant part of the Thompsons Road Business Corridor, which is still the number one infrastructure advocacy target on behalf of the organisation. There is an estimation that this particular PSP could potentially deliver over 6,500 jobs, and they could be jobs that relate to development, to ongoing amenity and services, and other employment and economic activities within the precinct. Very briefly, Chair, it is 317 hectares that will be covered by the PSP. As I said, it is incorporated within Thompsons Road. There is also Berry Cranbourne Road as the north-south primary arterial. There's Linsell Boulevard and the Narre Cranbourne Road also to the west. That incorporates other parts of Thompsons Road, as I've said, between Berry Cranbourne Road, Cooirup Road and Pakenham Canadian Shire, and the planned future principal freight network road. The policy context for this includes the South East Growth Corridor plan from 2012. It identifies this particular precinct as a business with residential, and the Melbourne Industrial Commercial Land Use Plan for 2020 identifies the precinct as a regionally significant commercial area, future growth area business with residential precinct. So with that being the case, Chair, and considering the issue and why we are fast-tracking this matter tonight and that we are delegating authority for the submission to be made, it is because of the significance of the opportunity itself. There is one point that I do need to make, that there will not be a support for the council to act as the development agency for intersection projects located on declared arterial roads. The recommendation for this particular item of concern is that the development agency, it could be Vic Roads in the context, should be the agent responsible, particularly for the development of ICT infrastructure projects within the area, and considering the complexity around some of the arterial roads in that part of the southeast and their significance, that is a reasonable point of objection and for noting. With those comments, Chair, I am pleased to move the recommendation, particularly the delegated authority to the Manager of Growth and Investment, to ensure that the process continues to be met timely and within statutory guidelines as provided by the VPA accordingly.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I don't propose to add significantly to the comments that have been made by Mr Boardman, other than to assure the community that I support the method that's been adopted to ensure that Council can make an appropriate submission to this panel through to a VPA-initiated planning scheme amendment. Our support this evening is required because of the particular timetable in this time in the council calendar with respect to the caretaker period. I note that the papers tonight set out clearly the matters upon which we are delegating authority to make a submission, and I am grateful to the officers who have identified this as a matter that required action in this manner, and to ensure that the submissions that are made by Casey are appropriate to the particular requirements of this community in this important corridor. With those comments, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and thank you for referencing your appreciation for officers bringing this report to Council. It is a good example of the way that the panel of administrators have worked with the organisation in ensuring that the interests of the Casey community are met, and in particular that this process is going to continue throughout the caretaker period and the early life of the newly elected council. It is an important set of issues that the council officers have raised, in particular the issue of the Department of Transport and Planning maintaining that council should be the development agency for delivering the intersection projects, which could be an extremely costly matter. for this city funded by ratepayers. So I particularly endorse that piece and thank the officers for thinking through the issues and the continued work in submitting to the planning scheme amendment process initiated by the VPA. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.6, payment from contributions plan reserve. Is there a mover?
Yes, I'll move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Chair, this is a motion that's required, again, through our delegation power to ensure that appropriate payments are made subject to the Clyde Development Contributions Plan. I have read the papers, including the confidential attachment, and I note that payment to the landowner for the provision of the DCP land project will be conditional upon council entering an agreement with the landowner for the provision of the DCP land project and council being satisfied that the terms of the above agreement have been met, including but not limited to the vesting of the land in council. And again, I want to thank those officers who have identified this as a matter that needed this approach and ensuring that it happened at this stage in the cycle so that it's not in any way delayed by the caretaker period. And with those comments, I'm happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, likewise, I'm satisfied that this is a procedural motion or recommendation, I should say, that is complying with all relevant policies. And like Mr Belmar, I'm likewise pleased to second the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 5.7, the Max Pawsey Master Plan update. There is a recommendation. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I'll move item 5.7.
Mr Boardman, and a seconder.
Yes, I'll second it.
Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, the Max Pawsey Reserve is a parcel of land that is literally out the front here at Bunjil, just to my right. It is a mixed-use parcel of land that has various sporting, various community and other recreational facilities, and the master plan that we're adopting today, which is updated, is being prepared following a 6-week period to seek feedback on the changes that were first advocated by the organisation, which included updates to the AFL Cricket Pavilion, potential amalgamation of other community facilities, updated facilities to the scorer shed, half basketball court, public toilet, skate parks, etc., etc. It should be noted that since adopting the master plan in 2020, that council has received $1 million from the Commonwealth. This was funded through the Investing Our Communities program. That was to fund the play space and car park upgrades, which I believe have been completed, and $1.7 million funding was also received through Melbourne Water Livable Waterways program, the Department of Energy, Environment, Climate Action Integrated Water Management Fund to support the delivery of stormwater harvesting in the precinct, which is a project that also has been completed, that many community representatives and visitors to Bunjil would have been witnessing the work's been going on recently for the last 12 or so months. There are a number of changes to the revised plan, and this is due to changes in the use of the precinct over time, particularly as it relates specifically to the location of the tennis pavilion. That was due to the before mentioned Melbourne water requirements, the alteration of the decking system around the stormwater harvesting system, which was a change that was identified as a design improvement throughout the construction phase, the alteration of the location of the play space to be more accessible, and to be set back from the Western Oval, which is used for AFL and cricket. There was various changes to the car park. There was removal of the proposed dual-purpose pavilion for the AFL cricket and scouts, and this was to reflect concerns and feedback that was raised by Scouts Victoria about operating in the same building as the sporting tenants. And my understanding is the Scouts Hall that is currently within Max Pawsley Reserve will remain the same. And there was also removal of a number of projects, including the Narrywarren Bowls Club roof installation, the clubhouse upgrade, electronic scoreboard over reconfiguration, etc., because of changes as reflecting in the revised master plan. But it is pleasing, Chair, to see that a number of the projects have already been delivered and completed. There's certainly an improved overall precinct, not just visually but through amenity and usability, and that this master plan puts in place future use and future expectations of the site itself, and one where I'm sure the community who are regular users of Max Pawsley will be very excited to see further development in the future. With those words, I'm pleased to move the updated master plan as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful to the officers that have undertaken this work. I note that we have observed over the years the work that has been done at Max Pawsley Reserve. I note that it is an important council asset which has opportunities for continual use, being here right next to Bunjil, and used by both sporting clubs and by the Scouts. I note the matters that are raised of concern by the Scouts are important matters that need to be considered. And I'm grateful also to all those members of the community who have participated through the KC Conversation website and through correspondence. And with those comments, I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I note once again the amount of time and consultation effort that's been undertaken to ensure that the community have been able to have their say on this process, and I commend the officers for their work. Put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. 5.8, the tender assessment and contract award for concrete works. Very important contract. Do we have a mover for the recommendation on page 629?
Yes, I will move that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Seconder?
Seconded, Chair.
Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Tonight I'm moving that the organisations who are set out there in the recommendation be awarded a contract in the manner that is there set out. There is a confidential attachment, but it's those entities will be awarded contracts for the prices provided within the schedule of rates for the periods of this contract, with contingency for CPI increases over the period of 6 years, being the total if extensions executed for years 2 and 4. I want to thank those members of both council and the community who have been involved in ensuring that a careful tender process is undertaken. Concrete works is obviously a fundamental part of what we do as a council, and ensuring that civil works are done by appropriate organisations for appropriate rates is a very important task for us. And I've considered the material, and again I want to thank those members of staff who have undergone the careful exercise of selecting the ultimate successful tenderers. And I note as well the important work that is done by our staff, headed by Mr Collins, in ensuring that appropriate rates are always put forward, and to ensure that the parties can fulfil their obligations. And with those comments, I am happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman.
Chair, likewise, I have considered the tender evaluation report and also the probity report, which are confidential attachments to this report, and are satisfied that all matters of procurement and policy have been adhered to, and that the overall principle of value for money, ensuring that the works through those that have ultimately will be awarded the contract can be completed. But most importantly, I would like to place on the record, Chair, my appreciation to the organisation for explaining to me the extensiveness, the complexity and the different types of concrete works which actually exist within the organisation, and it might come as a surprise to some of us that it is very varied and extensive, the type of works that require concrete in a municipality as large and as diverse as Casey, one which is reflective over the number of contractors that ultimately are being awarded as a result of the tender that's just been concluded. So I do thank council officers for the very interesting education that they provided me as well throughout this process, and I'm happy to second the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. 5.9 is endorsement of organisational documents, and there's quite a list that we are revoking and adopting in this, but the majority of these are out of date or have been subsumed in other planning policy, etc. So I'll leave it to the mover and seconder to further speak to that. Do I have a mover?
Chair, I will move the recommendation at item 5.9.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr Belmont. Mr Boardman.
And Chair, note that there is over 550 pages of new and superseded policies, and your introduction sums up the recommendation quite aptly. There are 10 new documents that are being recommended for either endorsement as new policy documents or reviewed documents, and there is 21 documents that are being discontinued. I don't seek to take the time for members in the gallery and or online to go through the specifics of the policies and or their titles. Suffice to say that this is an extensive exercise completed by the governance team within the organisation as part of almost a finality of preparing for the incoming council to ensure a number of things. One is that the policy settings and the policy documents reflect the statutory requirements of the organisation. It reflects the operational considerations, which are vital considering that there is a return to elected councils. But most importantly, as you articulated, Chair, is that it's avoiding duplication and ensuring that any policies that are redundant or superseded by virtue of other policies that have been adopted through the domain strategies or through other policies that we've adopted as a council are not in any way reflected through old or long-standing policies. There are a number of the policies that do go back to 2015 and 2018. Undoubtedly that the explanation provided in the public report provides the basis as to where they either have been better reflected in updated policies or assumed into more comprehensive domain strategies, which has been clearly the case in a number of them. But there is one policy I do want to make a specific reference to, and that is on page 1117 of the public reports. It is the Councillor and Employee Interaction Policy, which does set the basis of the obligations both ways of council employees, but importantly of councillors, to discharge their responsibilities insofar as their interactions with each other, to set the guidelines of what are appropriate and expected interactions both from a professional and a behavioural basis, and also to set a process in place where if interactions do take place, either in a personal capacity or inadvertently, or where there's been an approach or a representation that may have been outside of this particular policy or through circumstances which are unavoidable, is how to ensure that such interactions are managed accordingly. It is critical that with an incoming council, and particularly with changes to the Local Government Act in the last 4 years, changes to the Code of Conduct, the governance rules, and certainly since Operation Sandon, Chair, that incoming councillors familiarise themselves not just with this policy but all policies, but particularly understand that they need to act in a professional, courteous and respectful manner, that they need to adhere to certain standards of expectations around communication and behaviour, and that if there is, as I've said, anything that is inadvertent, that advice is sought. And quite critically, from a council's perspective, that should be through the CEO or the mayor, depending on what the circumstances are. But as the policy makes it very clear that if in the avoidance of doubt, then any councillor who believes that they have a improper interaction with council staff should seek the advice of the Chief Executive Officer and ensure that any mediations are dealt with consistent with this policy. It is pretty critical that council is aware of their obligations accordingly. Likewise for council staff, this policy makes it very clear that there is a hierarchy of reporting and obligations when dealing with councillors. Not only does that provide clarity around the communication tree, but it'll ultimately result in better decision making. But critically, this provides certainty around how this organisation should operate professionally and efficiently, and to ensure that councillors themselves and council staff don't get involved in operational matters and or council decision-making processes, vice versa. So it could not be clearer. It is an exceptionally important policy, one which complements the overall governance policies as we have adopted on numerous council meetings now, and it almost concludes the policy review update of the organisation in preparation for the return to elected councillors. With those words, I'm pleased to move the recommendation as put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. I want to endorse the comments of Mr Boardman as to the importance of ensuring that as we move towards an elected council, the work has been undertaken to ensure that policies that are no longer appropriate have been revoked, and that new policies which are appropriate for our return to an elected council are in place. I want to also adopt and make my own comments about the councillor and employee interaction policy. It is a fundamental policy that should be read by all members of the community considering standing for council. This will be an important code for new members of council to understand their interaction with employees, and to understand as well the important role that continues to be played by the CEO in ensuring that the best behaviour is maintained by both members of council and staff, and ensuring their work for the betterment of the community. I note that sometimes when you read policies like this, they can sometimes be a little jarring in the subheadings, and that they might sound like they're trying to tell you how to behave, but really these are policies which are here to assist. They're here to provide guardrails to ensure that members of the community elected to council understand their responsibilities, and they're not intended to inflame. They're simply intended to provide clear words which can be easy to understand, that set out what is expected behaviour. And with those comments, and again thanking the members of council staff who have taken on the mammoth task of finding the policies that needed to be revoked, I'm happy to move this motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar, and thank you both for referencing the councillor and employee interaction policy. I was recently part of a panel with the Chief Municipal Inspector and the Deputy CEO of IBAC, and they both strongly emphasised and recommended that every council in Victoria have a policy like this. They obviously experience and deal with the worst of matters, but they were very, very particular in emphasising the importance of every council having such a policy as a piece of guidance to both the organisation and councillors, but particularly as a mitigating policy should there be any integrity or corruption issues, so that matters that are raised by council laws are able to be documented and mapped and recorded. So I took that on board, and I must say I was quite a little bit surprised as the emphasis they gave to it, but pleased that we have in fact already done the work on this ahead of those comments in the panel, and tonight are adopting such a policy amongst a range of others. I do note the incredible clean-up work that has been undertaken with respect to a range of policies throughout the organisation. We have progressively undertaken this over a number of years, so I am hopeful that those review processes are pretty much complete. I'm getting nods from officers. Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Move to item 5.10, which is the change of the special council meeting date, and there is a recommendation on page 1127. This is a result of some recent advice from the VEC outlining their committed date for declaring election results. So unfortunately, the date that we had set without their advice was going to actually be prior to the declaration of the election results, which wouldn't have been suitable. So the recommendation is to reschedule that to Tuesday the 19th of November, and I seek a mover for that recommendation.
Yes, I will move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Seconder?
Chair, I will second the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar?
Chair, can I adopt the comments that you have made as to the reason for needing to move this motion this evening, and that is that when we set our agenda for council meetings in December last year, we were not aware of the date for the confirmation of the poll by the VEC, and as a result, it's proposed that we now have a council meeting on Tuesday the 19th of November to ensure that on that date we have the results of the election. And with those comments, I'm happy to move the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, likewise, I understand the justification for this and note that it was a very honest mistake and one that is completely justifiable in the circumstances.
Thank you. I'll put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That concludes officer reports this afternoon, and I'll move on to item 6, which is consideration of reports of committees. And I simply note the reports of committees and records of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7 is petitions, and there are none for consideration for this evening's meeting. Item 8, late reports. There are no late reports. Urgent business. There is one item of urgent business, and it is to give public notice of an additional item of business being added to the October special council meeting, due to it being the last council meeting of the panel of administrators term, where council will table the final administrator's report to the Minister of Local Government at that October meeting. I firstly need a motion to admit and allow that item of urgent business to be considered. Do I have such a motion?
Chair, I'm happy to move a motion. I'm just to clarify, am I doing it by leave or am I moving a motion under urgent business?
No, what we're doing here is enabling the consideration of that motion today.
Sure. I'm happy to move a motion allowing consideration of the motion that you have just put.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. And a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
And I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? And now I seek a mover for the item of urgent business, and that is to give public notice of an additional item. I'll leave it to the mover to read.
Chair, I will move that, and this is moved under urgent business, that we give public notice of an additional item of business being added to the October special council meeting, due to it being the last council meeting of the panel of administrators term. Council will table the final administrator's report to the Minister for Local Government at the October special council meeting 2024, and I'll move that recommendation in my name.
Thank you. And that is on the screen. And do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. Mr Boardman?
Chair, to simply endorse your comments that it is the last meeting of ourselves as the panel administrators. We will also be adopting the annual report of the council, or considering, I should say. I don't want to, things could change between then and now. We will be considering the annual report of the council at that special council meeting, and it is appropriate that we conclude our term by considering and potentially adopting our final report to the minister, in which we will articulate in some detail of the achievements and the experience and the recommendations and findings of our term over what has been now 4.5 years. And I very much look forward to that meeting and specifying what has been a very interesting period of not only my life but my career.
Thank you, Mr Boardman. Mr Belmar.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in seconding the motion, I'm mindful that at the moment there is one item on the agenda for that meeting, which is the annual report, and it's appropriate that at a council meeting we have the opportunity to address our closing report and to reflect on the last 4.5 years. I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you, Mr Belmar. I put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Item 10 is closed council, and we do have one item for consideration. So that leaves me to close the open meeting this afternoon and thank those who have attended and listened, and I bid you good afternoon.